Hi Bodcasters, it's Rich and Rich here. Happy New Year. Hope you had a great end to 2024 and an incredible start to 2025. We're taking a little bit of a break before Season 3. We'll be back on the 4th of February, but until then, we're going to be re-releasing some of our previous episodes, and we're going to be starting that off with our Season 1 interview with Ian, talking about his role from the checkouts to becoming a global troubleshooter. I want to say thank you to Ian for being one of our early guests on the podcast, and we're really looking forward to getting some brand new guests here for you in the third season starting in February. We'll catch you on the 4th of February for the Bodcast Bootcamp.
Oh, it's the Middle-aged Bodcast. Getting older, but having a blast with Rich and T.A. You're never alone on this journey to feel better in mind, body, and soul. They're here to say the middle-aged life's not just okay, it's freaking great.
Welcome to the Middle-aged Bodcast with me, Raging Rich.
And me, T.A. Shelano.
And T.A. It's episode 9. We've almost come to the end of season 1 of the Middle-aged Podcast. I can't believe it.
I can't believe it. No, it's incredible. And obviously we're going to be finishing today with another guest episode. Our third and final one of the season, so looking forward to that with Ian today. But before we get to that, I suppose, Rich, we better give the listeners an update on the weight loss challenge.
Yeah, I suppose we'd better get that over with. Thankfully, it's nearly the end of the challenge, but yeah, let's hear the results for this week.
Okay, drum roll, please. T.A. Shelano has put on 3 pounds.
Oh, okay.
And now for Raging Rich.
Okay, yeah, let's see.
Drum roll, please. And Raging Rich has also put on 3 pounds. So it's a very poor week all round.
Well, I know what my reasoning was.
What's that?
Well, it was my mum and dad's wedding anniversary and we went out for a meal. And also, you know, the rest of the week throughout that, maybe I've made a few mistakes. But come on, what's your excuse?
Well, I also had a couple of social events, actually, I'm afraid, within the last week as well, that would have contributed to that, including going out for a curry. So, yeah, I'm afraid it's obviously a bad week for the both of us. But obviously next week we'll see the end of season 1 and the final results of the Weight Loss Challenge, where we will see who is the winner and also where we will actually reveal the beginning and end weights as well. So looking forward to that. But yeah, obviously going to need to improve in the next week.
So before we get started on this interview with Ian, T.A., do you want to inform our listeners why we're actually both in the same building again? Because this was all going to be done via a virtual call. We'd got it all set up. What went wrong?
You know, best laid plans and all that, Rich, and I am hugely apologetic. And I do owe you the money for the Uber. So basically, I thought I was all set up, ready to go. I'd obviously rang you before we were due to do...
Yeah, rang me to check I was ready.
Yeah,
and hadn't even bothered to check one of the most important parts of your recording setup.
Okay, so this being the first time, listeners, that we were actually going to do an interview virtually. The previous two with Amy and Laura were done in person in the studio. But with Ian today going to be done, virtually. The plan was I was going to be joining from home, Rich in his studio, Ian at his home, and it all was going to be fine. However, I realised about 10 minutes before that I only had, I didn't have the earphones that I needed to plug in to do the recording. And then rang Raging Rich in a raging panic myself of what I was going to do, because Mrs. Shelano has moved them and I don't know where they are, and she's out having her hair done. So Raging Rich went, "You're going to have to get Ian now," and like the professional that he is, got me an Uber within about 3 minutes, it seems, to my front door. I ran and jumped in with me, notebook and me wallet in my hand and me phone, just to get here, to be even remotely close to starting slightly late our forthcoming interview with Ian. So I am hugely apologetic, Rich, but I also understand, and this will go into the season 2 negotiations, that you had to desperately get that Uber there to get my talent here for the interview, and how important T.A. Shelano is to the running of the Middle-aged Podcast.
Oh, you're very important to it. I just thought we should update the listeners on why we were suddenly in the same room. And I also hope you appreciate the fact that I've had you made a custom Middle-aged Podcast coaster as well to take back with you.
I am overjoyed with the Middle-aged Podcast merchandise. You know, I'm hugely honoured, and I will pay you for that and the taxi.
Don't be silly. But yeah, after all of that, I think it's time that we got into the interview with Ian. So let's get straight to it. Well, welcome back to the Middle-aged Bodcast. This is episode 9. And T.A, we have a special guest with us again this week.
We do, yeah. Our third and final guest episode of the season. It's our first virtual one as well. So today we're going to be joined by Ian. You want to say hello, Ian?
Hello. Nice to be asked to be on, guys. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Ian. So, Ian, here you are. You're going to do a reflection for us of kind of success in middle age. And we've asked you today, as somebody who's kind of gone from the checkout and stacking shelves to head office and a global troubleshooter, highly successful retail professional. So we're really keen to get a view of your career and your experiences that we think will be really helpful and enjoyable for listeners today. So can you give listeners a whistle-stop tour of your rise to the top? Because we really want listeners to get to know yourself and find out the secret to your success.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, T.A. So whistle stop tour as it goes, and feel free to stop me if I do ramble. But success is measured in a number of different things. So what's successful to me and maybe to you might not be to others, but hopefully it can be a little bit about inspiring to think differently. So currently sitting here at the age of 46, so a bit of a ripe old age. And 30 years since I actually started my career within retail, which I fell into, really. It wasn't anything that I'd actually ever expected that I was going to do. Growing up, I always wanted to study law. I wanted to be a solicitor. I wanted to then go and be a barrister. I used to watch lots of law programs on the TV, and I thought, oh yeah, I can do that. But you know, as things sort of like move on, I remember getting a job and an application form for the specific retailer I worked for. And my dad helped me fill out the application form. So there was a few lies in there, like I didn't ride a bike, but, you know, I did like cooking, and, you know, I had sort of like, you know, aspirations to do a number of different things. And as soon as I started there, I started to really enjoy the interaction that I had, not just with the people that I worked with, but with the customers, and also really enjoying different parts of what made retail what it is. Because it's just not one sum of one part. There's lots of varying roles that go on and that help people. So started, you know, sort of, you know, working around, you know, on the checkouts mainly. And then I was sort of, you know, supporting with running the checkouts. I worked in the cigarette kiosk when the National Lottery started. So that gives you an indication of how long that was, and really enjoyed that, you know, helping, you know, people that came in and won and giving their money out on a Sunday, which was great. And then bit by bit, just did far more. And at this time, I was studying my A-levels at college with the aspiration to go to university, as I said, and study law. So, you know, I was doing English, business studies and government and politics. And I was really, really enjoying it. But the draw of retail was making me enjoy that more. And it made me really think about what I wanted to do. So I started sort of skipping college and probably doing more stuff with overtime within the retail environment. And in the time when I wasn't actually working or being paid for work, I'd start to learn other areas, which would then save my bus fare home, because sometimes I did split shifts, so it was easier. So to really immerse myself in what I could do. And then bit by bit, it just sort of became more and more apparent that the academia that I thought I was going to go into wasn't the pathway for me. And some opportunities had come up in regards of a management training program. So I got on this management training program when I was 17, and I went through and did lots of different training books, and it was about different skills, effective management skills, meeting skills, presentation skills, some stuff around health and safety, P&L, the things that you'd expect in the late 90s to be part of a retailer. You know, there's far different now in regards of far more with leadership and well-being. But then, you know, that was what you did. And then you went away for a week and you were on a course with a number of other people in the same position as you. And you basically were put there, and you learned lots of things. You learned lots of skills, and you were asked to go away and run a project for 3 months and look at what you deliver in those 3 months, and can come back and present it after 3 months with the regional director and his whole team. And it was like a sign-off process. And that all happened quite quickly. So, within the space of sort of like, I think it was about 14, 15 months. And then I did this presentation, which was really nerve-wracking, at the regional centre in Lakeside, as it was then. And it was all of the directors and all of the store managers. So it felt like Dragon's Den, which was multiplied by about 10. And I ran a presentation on a cafe project I'd done about how I delivered profitability. And, I got signed off, which was amazing. And then was really successful in the next bit to be asked to go and support, when I was 19, in the first hypermarket that the retailer I worked for had in 1994, which was a fantastic opportunity for me. And I spent 4.5 years there, and it was a number of different roles, but a real testament to what I put in, but what I also got out of it through people, through learning from other people, through different leaders that I worked with, and having the ability to grow my skills, but not just on a retail level, but also on a social level, because you got to sort of meet lots of different people from different backgrounds, whether, different diverse cultures. And that was the sort of starting point for me in regards of, I was quite a people person anyway, but developing my sort of retail, my leadership skills to be a little bit more within that retail landscape. And as I said, I did a number of different roles there in over a sort of 4.5 year period, which I stayed in that site. And then I was nominated to go on a 3-month fast track to senior manager. And I was thinking, wow, can I do this? All of those sort of niggling bits of doubt. I was really confident in my ability to do stuff. I always sometimes wasn't confident in what other people thought of me. And that was not just from what I could do from a retail perspective, but on a personal level as well. Also sort of fighting, with the sort of inside battle of being a gay man and growing up in that sort of position, and growing up in the sort of late 90s, and the acceptance and non-acceptance that you actually sort of were challenged with when you worked within, retail, but also with the general public and people's perceptions of you. So I always sort of like fought with that. And luckily I sort of went through this 3 months, and then, got signed off on this fast track scheme. And in 2001, I was appointed into my first store as a lead manager. And then bit by bit, sort of like, it was all about how you grow teams, how you enable teams to be better, how you deliver your KPIs, and you deliver KPIs through teams. Some people did it at the cost of a team, whereas mine was always about building that team to deliver with you, so everybody knew what they needed to actually do. And then, what we all got from it as well. It's such a great feeling to be able to go from a really low base where you might not have been delivering certain KPIs, and then actually get to the different point where you are, and to share that with a team that you've been able to maybe take from a lower base and actually bring them on a journey with you to actually enable them to know how important they are and what they can do far more and build their skills, their knowledge. It was just really one of those things that I found, it just inspired me and always made me just want to do more and more and more. And over the sort of, few years that sort of transpired from there, I've probably spent between sort of 2 to 3 years in shops before I was sort of moved to another one. So, some people call it Troubleshooter. I call it sort of maybe not a troubleshooter, but looking at opportunities to go into a bigger store and realize the potential of what's there, and not just through the people, but through the business as well. So I did another sort of 3 stores after this one in quite quick succession, delivered the right KPIs, got everything the way it should be, delivered the right culture in store. And that was really important for me, because actually you shouldn't leave a shop and everything then goes and disappears based on what you've done. You should be able to go, and it's a bit of a legacy because you've set everybody up there to be able to do it without you. And I think that was a real testament to the teams that I worked with that enabled me to be able to do that. There were challenges. I've had challenges along the way with people talking to me and, saying sort of quite frank things. You make me feel like I don't know anything. You make me feel like I don't know my job. I've doing my job for a number of years, and you've come in and you've changed everything. And that's quite difficult to be able to work with people, especially some people who are older than you, that may think about things in a different way. But when you sit down and you explain to people the reasons, and actually it's not about making people feel bad or that they've done anything wrong. It's just about helping them find new skills to deliver stuff in a different way, which actually benefits everybody. So not just them, but the business, me, the people they work with, the people they inspire, and actually the next generation of leaders that will come up within a business. So yeah, did that for a period of time. And then I started and went on a store manager academy where we used to get with a group of people, which was run by some of the personnel team. And then we'd read books, we'd do book shares, we'd talk about what we've got from the book and what we learned from it. We'd look about how we could build that into our lives. I remember one of the first books I read was the 1 Minute Manager books, and I still read them now. I actually downloaded the new copies on Audible a few weeks ago, and there's a load of books. So you've got the 1 Minute Manager, the 1 Minute Manager Meets a Monkey, and they're really short, but they're great, really helping you to understand what matters and to try to take away some of the noise and really make yourself become a better leader. So I did that for a period of time, and then I went out as a regional manager looking after specific areas of mostly around unknown loss and security for a group of stores, which was challenging in itself. You know, remotely working was a challenge. You know, I'm quite a social person, so being in a car, traveling 1,000 miles a week, spending a lot of time on your own is quite isolating. And actually, I get energy from people. So I had to try and find new ways of doing it. And actually, you know, trying to spend more time in stores and less time driving. But when I wasn't driving, what could I do? What could I think about? Making sure that I did it in the safest possible way, because I started to do things like, you know, where people will take phone calls, but actually the distraction on a phone call when you're driving is huge. And I've learned sort of over the years that it's just not the right way to do stuff. But, you know, it was my time to reflect in the car, to think about what I could do, what I'd done, what was going to work in the future. And then when I finished, I'd write some notes. So I'd think about these things that would keep going around in my head. So I did that for a period of time, but with anything, you know, burnout, traveling 1,000 miles a week, covering 28 stores is a true story. And actually, I found that it was affecting me on a sort of mental health and an actual physical well-being perspective. So I had to take some action to then look at some opportunities and maybe doing something different. So I got the opportunity to go into our head office function and run a project, which I did for 3.5, 4 months. And then a role became available that was my ideal role, working in the service team. And I was asked if I would like to interview for it, which I did. And this was sort of, you know, in about 2007, I think it was. So in that time, my career had been over probably about 12 years by this point, but I actually delivered quite a lot within that sort of time. And successful in this role, and then was working as an operations manager in the office, looking after some service which would impact all of the stores that we had in the network. And I thought, you know, sitting when I was in a shop, I thought, yeah, I could do that. And when you go into an office and you start doing it, you realize that it's far harder than what you actually really think it is. And I had to really dig deep. For a period of time, I went through that whole emotional cycle of change of, I love it, I'm really excited, I'm in head office, it's great, you know, I've got there, I've made it, you know, all of these great things. And then all of a sudden you're like, I can't do it. The self-doubt, someone's asked me to write a paper, I don't know how to use Excel, how am I going to deliver this stuff? And bit by bit, I became my own worst enemy, chipping away at myself, even though people were telling me that I could. And I think that over the next sort of like 9 months in that role, it was one of the hardest sort of times that I had in my career, really, really doubting my ability and wondering whether I could do it. So I spent a lot of time with peers and talking to lots of different people about what was happening with me, how I felt, people giving me advice, people telling me not to be so hard on myself, people giving me the great stuff around, actually, Ian, when you're writing a paper, don't always think that you've got to start at the top, start at the bottom, because you know what your outcome is. And sometimes you know what your beginning is, but the middle bit's harder. So try and do it in a different way. And there's some real little formulas on Excel that will really help you. I remember when someone gave me how to do a VLOOKUP, and it was like a changing point in my Excel life. I remember writing it on a Post-it note and sticking it on my desk, because we all had our own fixed desks then. Just so excited about being able to merge not just two spreadsheets together, but the specific cells from spreadsheets to match something else, which sounds really sad now. And with all of the future of technology, you can get them to do it for you. But at the time, it was a game changer for me, and I really, really enjoyed it. So that was sort of like that side. And then after that, I sort of, started to really deliver in my role, understood what I was meant to be doing, some great projects about delivering improvements in efficiency, improvements in operation, but also starting to understand and work a lot more collaboratively with teams within technology and teams within commercial and teams within marketing, which then gave me a really good insight into those businesses and how everything links together. So those sort of parts of my career were the enablers, I believe, for me to get in the position I was when I was lucky enough in 2012 to then be promoted after doing a secondment role to head of service operations and experience for the UK. Which, it was weird, because when I went back to when I started when I was 16, I had these aspirations at that time that I wanted to go into the office and I wanted to head up service. And that was in 1994. And then we're in 2012, and it's actually happened, which, I always say, always have those dreams and those challenges, because you can make anything happen. I think, anything can happen. You can really push yourself. And I'd really pushed myself. And I still had the sort of pinch me moment in regards of, am I actually doing this? Is this actually happening? And then for the following sort of 12 years from there, my career just grew. And so did my team. So everything was done through building an engaged team, an empowered team that were able to have the autonomy to do what they needed to do. And my role was to coach. It was to lead. It was to give them the examples when they needed some help. It was to be the person that when they really got stuck, I was there. And actually, the person that was their biggest cheerleader, it felt like a family. It was my extended family. And I was very, very territorial around it. So actually, to lots of other people, they probably felt that I was very protective, but it was for the right reasons. And then over a period of time, I started looking after 3 things in the business. And then bit by bit, with various transformation programs, as we're all aware of now, ended up looking after 12 areas of operations for different things in the stores for the UK. So that was amazing. Really, really good.
Ian, thanks so much for the introduction there to your career. I mean, really fascinating in terms of from such a young age and what you achieved in that time frame. I'm keen to understand a lot of young people struggle to know what they want to do or have that inspiration. I'd like to hear a bit more about what really spurred you on from such a young age and how you kept that motivation going.
It's a weird one. I've always liked learning stuff. And I think that, constantly learning and evolving has always been something that I've strived to do, whether that was academically or not. Even though when it comes to some of the sort of more manual stuff, I'm not exactly the best person at learning. And I just think some of the things that spurred me on, TA, were like always knowing that I could do anything that anybody else could. And people told me sometimes when I worked within retail that I couldn't. So an example of that is when I was a bakery manager. And a baker told me that I couldn't get the dough out of one of the big mixing bowls in one. Now, that's a really, really hard thing to do when you've got this sort of big kilo of bag of flour and you're chucking it in and you're putting the water and everything else. But it sort of spurs you on sometimes to do stuff. So throughout everything that I've done, it's always been about, I know that I can do it and pushing myself to do it. Sometimes it was a bit of a tick box because I never really wanted to do it. Because there's certain things we all do out there, but we'll do it because we just want to prove to ourselves and others that we can. It doesn't mean we actually like it, but it gives us that sense of achievement afterwards. And I think thriving on a sense of achievement and also the fact that I did it, that can-do attitude is really important. And it is about the positivity. I, like anybody else, have suffered throughout my life and career with self-doubt, mind talk. I sort of liken my head to it's like putting popcorn in a microwave sometimes. And obviously all of a sudden it starts going bang, 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 bang. And you've got all of these things going on and you can't really make sense of it. But I've tried to sort of channel it in the ways that I know, which is just push myself to sort of continually be a better version of myself. And if that's just learning one new thing, then great. You know, if that's actually going on a leadership course and understanding something, it's great. One of the key things that helped me was some stuff around mind talk. And I really struggled with it. And I remember sitting down with somebody once and they said to me, right, okay, so there's three things with mind talk. One of them is it true? And you sort of sit there and you go, right, okay, if it's true, then you know that it's true. And you can actually say, right, okay, I need to do something about that. So it goes in the true box. The other point when you've got mind talk is, right, is it true? Well, if it's not true, then it must be false. And if it's not false, if it's false, then don't worry about it because you're just overthinking everything and it's your mind talk in overdrive. So actually it's not a problem. So forget it. And then there's another bit in your head where you'll always go between this don't know. And most of the time where you don't know, it is actually false as well. But there will be times it is true. You just need to keep asking yourself why. And lots of those probing questions to sort of get underneath it. And some mind talk, everyone thinks that mind talk is always about negative. But actually, when you start to delve into it, the positivity you can get from the right mind talk, which helps you to be better and helps you to be a better version of yourself is really, really good. So I think pushing yourself, always striving to do the best, always sort of taking those little things about I can do it and that can do attitude and just setting those goals, you know, having those goals. I was lucky enough to listen to a talk to Sally Gunnell this week at a customer experience event I was at. She was talking around sort of be the challenge for yourself because no one else will be that. And it resonated right back to when I was at school listening to this sort of multi-award, you know, multi-medal athlete. And I remembered that. And that stuck in. And I think it's, you know, it's those sort of things that I sort of always would say is important things.
Thank you, Ian. You've mentioned as well about some of the challenges that you had. You touched upon that briefly, but what's sort of been some of the biggest challenges that you've had during that early part of your career, and sort of how did you overcome any setbacks that sort of came your way during that time?
I think there's a two-part to this, Rich, actually. So one of the challenges is obviously me. And I think I've touched on some of those things in regards of sort of like, you know, you have that self-doubt. Can I do it? And I've explained some of the mechanisms I've got there. But then the other challenges is always other people's perceptions of you. And as much as we hate to think that other people impact us, they do. And even when we say that they don't, they do because it's subliminal. There's loads of things, you know, we'll have something there that will just be that somebody else has mentioned or said one day that will just be always thinking in your head. When I was in my early sort of management career, one of my managers at the time, I remembered wasn't bald then, and I had short, black, spiky hair. And I decided in the sort of the late 90s, early 2000s that I was going to have some highlights. I had these highlights, little bit of blonde tips on these. And I remember a manager calling me and basically pointing to someone who was working, another colleague who was working on the sales floor who had bleached blonde hair, and basically said to me that I made him think that that was okay to have that by doing it. I completely took, because obviously I was gay, straight away, because there was a lady who was a training manager who had exactly the same, to which I pointed out afterwards that I was really clear about. So I think there's always been niggles in my head as I've grown up about always not just needing to be the best, but I've always wanted to be better than the best because I thought I had to fight against something in regards of my own sexuality. And that's been something that I have found a challenge throughout my career, not just with managers, but with people, not just be people, but customers. Most people, when you either meet me or hear me speak, will be able to work out that I'm gay. So it's not something that's like hidden, but obviously, you know, when people listen, it's a bit of a surprise, and then they decide to sort of take it in different ways, and whether that's in a negative way where it's just sort of like names behind backs, laughs, smirks, etc., or using it to sort of like potentially impact me as a person in regards of my career. And actually my ability to be able to do a job is reflected by the fact of my sexuality, but which it absolutely wasn't. So that was another real big thing for me that always made me push to want to be not just the best version of myself, but to show that you can be who you want to be and be who you are, be authentic, and you will get there. But I always wanted to do that because I felt I had something to prove. I always wanted to prove people wrong. And maybe sometimes it wasn't about that. We have lots of things, but for me, it was about proving people wrong was the biggest one. And the other one was making my parents proud of me for the decision that I'd made to not continue in academia. And that was always a challenge that I actually, spoke to my parents about quite late in my 30s, about the impact that it had at the time. But obviously my whole reason and the challenge and my drive to be the best version of myself wasn't just for me, but it was proved to them that I'd made the right decision when I decided to leave and not be a solicitor and not do the academia route and everything else. So I think they're the sort of main things that I would say.
I think what's interesting with that is you're touching on then the difference between perhaps just that, they call it imposter syndrome, I think sometimes now. And perhaps if you talk about just having to confront that as one issue, it sounds like you're then confronting that potential issue versus then thinking, is someone challenging me based on they just don't think I'm good enough for the job? Or are they making that assessment because of who you are in terms of your sexuality? And versus, as you say, that thing with the parents where, you didn't then go down the university academic route and this is what you chose to do, yet have then fought to strive to be so successful. It sounds like quite an exhausting kind of experience really, to have gone through. I mean, I know you touched on it slightly earlier a little bit as well, but how have you sort of implemented that building of a resilience within you to manage all of that and, your work-life balance and expectation without effectively that having a hugely detrimental impact on you?
I mean, it's a great question. I think I've hidden behind a make-believe mask for a number of years. Ian's always been happy, the life and soul, always wanted to bring, happiness and the fun times and obviously make people feel good about themselves. And sometimes at a detriment to my own personal, how I'm feeling and my well-being. I actually used this in a talk I did about 3 or 4 years ago, where I realized that I used to go into the office and I'd always be walking around going, hi, morning, smiling. And there could be so much else going on inside, but no one would ever know. And someone said that to me once, you're always so happy. You're always so energized. I love speaking to you. I love doing this. And I had to sit and reflect on it and think, wow, because that is exhausting. And what you've just said is the actual word there, but it was exhausting to be me at those times. And I never really faced into it for a number of years because I didn't want it to change who I was and what I've been able to achieve and deliver, because that was, I'll say character. So that was the character or the persona that I put on. But yeah, I think over the years, it's got harder and harder, TA, really. I thought I could get over anything, when people talked around struggles and, mind talk, mental health, etc. I just used to think, right, okay, pick yourself up, dust yourself off. You've got this. It's fine. The only person that's going to be able to help yourself is you. And I think that's a true story. But at the same time, you need some tools and you need to be able to open up to give people the opportunity to understand what's going on and how you are. So I think what I've tried to do is become a little bit more mindful of that. I never used to like my own company, which sounds really odd. I was never one of these people that was good on my own. And I think that then whenever I had that time on my own, I would then always want to be with somebody else. So I'd want to go out and I'd want to have a drink and I'd want to be social. And one of the things that I have found is that just having my own time, having time on my own to do my own thing, whether that's to binge watch something on Netflix or Disney, or whether it's to sort of listen to audiobooks or read books, listen to podcasts, listen to music, zone out, do something, cook, which I really enjoy. I don't get enough time to do it, but I really enjoy it. And trying to do stuff that I can get the energy from. But that's only been recently. I would say that's probably been in the last sort of 4 or 5 years of my career that I've started to do that. So, still a journey. And still finding those things that hopefully will help me to do it. But I'm facing those challenges head on now, instead of just burying it and putting my brave face on, and finding mechanisms to help me and not being afraid to talk to people or ask for help, which I have been able to do, which has been really, really empowering, I would say. And I thought that if I did that, I'd be taking the power away from me. And what it's done is it's given it to me. So it's completely different to what I expected.
That's really interesting to hear that. And in terms of that reflection as you're getting older and how that has changed. And one of the things that are interesting here is obviously you got married in May this year. And I'm interested to hear how that may have impacted on your outlook on life or your perspective.
Yeah, I did. I got married to my wonderful husband in May this year, after being together for nearly 10 years. Something that I never thought would ever happen to me. Growing up, I always thought that that was for straight people to get married. And, it's great that I've been in a position to probably get my head in the right place and think differently over the years. And now, I'm a married man. And look, I think we go back, let's be even before the marriage. My career was the most important thing in my life outside my family. So my parents, my brothers, and my best friends, my career was the most important thing in my life. And actually, that probably impacted some of my relationships, even with my friends and family over the years, because I didn't value it on the same level. And I always used to say when I met someone, well, they've got to be more important than my career. And once they are, then that'll be the person I'll stay with. But it took a few times, I'd been with previous partners where they just weren't. But I never gave them the opportunity because my career was, I'd worked too hard for it and therefore that's important. So you've got to take second best. And you get to a point in life where you realize that attitude is completely wrong. And with the current where we are in the sort of world, work is there. And it's there to support you to be able to live and to have a great life. But you shouldn't live to work. You should work to live. And it was that. And everyone said it, but I never believed it. And then all of a sudden, I met my now husband. And I'd always said, when I meet someone that I've been with for a period of time that becomes more important than my job, I will stay with them for the rest of my life. And that's what happened. So it wasn't anything. Was it conscious or not? I'm not sure. But I always had that in my head. And then once it did, everything sort of made sense. And then I started to change the way that I was. So I used to work, as soon as I woke up in the morning, I'd look at my emails. But before I went to bed at night, I'd look at my emails. I work all the time. I don't do that anymore. I haven't done that for a few years. I discuss with my husband when I need to work. And if I need to work at weekends, which now I don't, and it's not expected, which is great, but he understands. I don't work past 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. I do look at my phone. I start no earlier than 8 o'clock in the morning. None of the stuff that I used to do before. I'm quite regimented in regards of what I do. But when I'm at work, I'm at work. So that's the difference. So I try to put everything into that. So we all do things where there's times when we're working where we procrastinate and we know it. And we'll sit there and we'll go, well, it's our fault. So we'll have to make up for that later. And that then, that's what you always do. But I try to be a lot more disciplined now, which then means that I don't have to do anything more outside work. And the business I work for now, which is different to where I was for, 28 years of my life, the health and well-being and the sort of direction from the leadership team is one of, you don't work weekends, you don't work past, you do your 9 to 5. Health and well-being is really important. Make sure you take your time for yourself, listen to Headspace, make sure you get this. And I think that all of those things, everything sort of happened all at the right time. But I think in the last few years, for sure, being in a stable relationship, now being married and having something else that's more important than my job has been a turning point for me, to make me ensure that I make the right decisions and to the best version, as I say, throughout all of this, the best version of myself.
You mentioned obviously how the world is at the moment, how things have changed. And one of the things that's happened in the last few years was COVID, and obviously having to work from home and change some of our working habits. And you mentioned there about making sure that you're working when you're working and not procrastinating and things like that. How did you manage that during COVID and during the lockdowns? What would you do to help you to make sure you were getting things done and not going off and doing things around the house? Or I think a lot of us, as you say, will have a thing where I'm at home, I've got these jobs in the house to do. How did you get around that and just focusing on the work?
It is a great question, Rich. I ended up having to do a lot of stuff with COVID due to the retailer I worked with at the time. So I was it was like my own little sort of war room that I had, which at the time was on my dining room table before, luckily, we had a summer house that we'd booked. We tried to get built before COVID, but it happened just afterwards. So I actually was able to move my office down there, which was brilliant. I'm not a good, I don't think I'm not going to give a good example of COVID working, because of what I was supporting with in regard to the delivery for the retailer I worked at meant that they were very long hours that I were working right at the very beginning and throughout. So I think for the first times, it was I just had to crack on to deliver what I needed to do. And that was some really, really long days to make sure that we were delivering safe shopping environments for customers when they needed to shop with us, and it was evident all of the things that we were trying to do to keep people safe. So that was first and foremost my priority. But I do think as it sort of went on, did I look after myself? Really? No, I didn't. I didn't give myself time. I think everybody drank more than what they should have done throughout COVID because it was an ability to be able to do so. So I'm not going to like give myself a kick in. It was fun. I'm going to say it was fun because it was. We had the greatest weather. We were blessed with people that were off. 5 o'clock was gin o'clock or vodka o'clock or beer o'clock, whatever we wanted to call it. So I think that, even if we'd have made those things and we'd sort of tried to stay motivated, when we got to that 4 or 5 o'clock time and then it was drinks, it was that was all. If anyone checked their recycling bins at the end of the week, I mean, ours was midweek and we were embarrassed. It was a really difficult time, but I did try to do stuff. Motivation for me was I had done a lot more where I was trying to walk because I knew that we weren't really going out anywhere, and otherwise I would be stuck at home. That was probably the only thing I could do was walk around where we lived and try to get the opportunity to go out. There was other things that I did to try to take my mind off work, which is the same as a lot of people. I bought a pasta maker, which was, trying to make pasta, which was one of my favorite things, and trying to zone out, because that was a key thing for me, zoning out on what was going on around me. So making the pasta, which went really, really badly the first time because there wasn't enough flour, divorce proceedings nearly started. But they didn't. And now we can make some decent pasta, or the uni pizza oven, where you don't put enough semolina on the pizza pick and then all of a sudden you try to put it in and every topping comes off and it's a nightmare. So I get a lot of joy from cooking. So if I couldn't entertain and have people over and my friends, it was that. We used to do a lot of quizzes. We used to do a lot of different things in the garden because that was the only thing you could do. But from a work perspective, when I reflect back now, I could have done far less. And I should have done far less, and I should have taken more times to pause, to stop, to give me the ability to just take a breather, which I didn't, which is why at the end of it, I did go through a little bit of a hard few weeks nearing my, the end of my career with this company, where it was just, I think everything had got on top of me and I needed to take some time out to do that. So I think if you don't do it and you don't look after yourself, at some point it will manifest itself in a different way. It's either a physical exhaustion or you're mentally exhausted or you're both, which is really unfortunate. When I've listened to some of your podcasts already, you've been really clear about some of the conversations you've had around mental health and well-being, and it's make sure that at those points, talk to somebody. I didn't do it for a period of time. I did it afterwards because I wanted everybody to still think, as I've discussed already, Ian is okay, because that is the mask that I put on and that I want everyone to see. But yeah, I would say COVID was one of the most challenging and the most rewarding parts of my life in regards to the challenge through work and managing a remote team and trying to be everything to them and keeping everybody safe. And then the rewarding part of it is what we were able to achieve delivering and what we were able to achieve through it. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I know it's not complete, but I wanted to be honest with my response.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being so honest with that.
You've given some really great, I think, advice during this today. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I'd say for me, don't be so hard on yourself and look at the positives. We are so good at really focusing on the negatives. It's intrinsic in everybody. You ask someone what they're good at and they go, oh, I don't know. But really think about it, because, understand what your superpower is. Is it friendliness? Is it the fact that you can actively listen to someone? Is it that you bring joy to people? Is it because you're funny? Play to your strengths, but really understand what your superpower is and then use that, push it into the overdrive to really drive everything you want to do, because it will help you in every single part of your life. And also, you won't understand what it will do to other people and what your superpower can enable for other people. And you won't know that all the time. They'll just pick it up as part of it. And what people get from you be that energy source, be that superpower. Make sure that you're really, really going and focusing on those positives to take forward is what I would say.
Ian, what if anything would you change from your career over the sort of period of time? Is there anything that you would change that looking back, you think actually I'd do that a little bit differently?
Yeah, I think I've always been I love people. As I said in the already this conversation, I get energy from people. But what happens sometimes with that is that sometimes people will take the energy from you and they'll take from you, and then they can end up taking advantage of you. And then that advantage is then detrimental to you in two ways. One, because it means you end up doing more. And one, because it means that they put their problems onto you and it makes it become your problem. And then what that then in turn does is that it stops you from being able to grow as a person and actually helping them to grow as a person. I think I've been too accommodating in some places, which has probably not been great. So what I would do is I would try and think of a different way that I could sort of help people. And also it's not about, it is being about taking advantage of, but try to spin it in a different way so it's a positive, but not be so accommodating all the time. Not being that it's just, if you go to Ian, he'll say yes and he'll do it. Oh yeah, just ask Ian because he'll be able to do it. And I think that's been something that's happened in all of my life. And now I'm getting to the point now where I go, that's not my job. Actually, no, I'm not going to help with. Right, okay, what I can advise you to do is this, but I would suggest you go and talk to somebody else. No, my priorities are far different. And it's taken all of this amount of time so that, 30 years within sort of my career, excluding me doing a paper round when I was 13, but to be able to do that. But I think that's the biggest thing. Look at the people who don't give you energy. Maybe make some real difficult choices to not have those people around you. But also don't let people take advantage of you. Help them to be able to do that themselves, because everyone will always come to you and you'll always be the person they do. But their priorities are always more important than yours. Make yourself the important person. Make you a priority and ensure that what you're doing enables other people to do exactly the same for themselves. So that's what I would be doing differently, and what I'm doing now as well.
On that sort of scope as well a little bit, has there been any specific people that have influenced you or inspired you during your career to kind of have that mindset, or just giving you the best bit of advice that you've kind of had during your career?
I've been really lucky to have worked with lots of amazing people, but there's been a couple of store managers what I've worked with previously, one of who is no longer with us, who just always said to me, Ian, mate, stop giving yourself a hard time and just know that you can do it. You've got it. You've got it. You don't need to worry about what everybody else is thinking. You've got it. You just need to believe in yourself and you will do anything. And that was the last store I actually worked in before I went regional. And that guy is an inspiration, or was an inspiration, to so many people. And then I've been very, very lucky to work with some fantastic leaders and peers in later years, in my office years, different directors and different people at different levels of the business who have just been honest with me and just told me to just be myself and be authentic. And it sounds cliche because a lot of people say it now, but this was happening years ago when we weren't in this sort of like world where mental health and well-being is really, really important. Some different directors that I have worked for, and people that I now class as friends that have inspired me, that I've watched struggle as well, that then have become the people that have also asked me for advice. So it becomes a two-way thing, which I think is a really, really lovely way to sort of build a relationship, whether it's, a working relationship, which then becomes a friendship. And, one of those people and one of the directors who I did work with for a period of time is still my friend now. And we're both no longer at the business that we were at. And she was at my wedding and had travelled quite far. And we still talk now. We share experiences. We try to help each other. But it is just around, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. And everything that I've spoke about, just bringing all of that stuff together. But so many people inspire me. I just think that, carry on being you, be the challenge, as Sally Gunnell said, which I found this week, which I love, my new thing.
Okay, well, thanks for that one, Ian. That was great. Just really interested to hear now. Obviously, we've heard so much about everything that's sort of gone in the past for you. What are your plans for the future?
Plans for the future. So, I have been with a new company that I have been with now for 2 years, which is great. I actually went in and started as a contractor, which was very, very new to me, having been with the same company for 28 years. But yeah, did some contract work on service and customer experience and ops, as that would be. And then was asked whether I would like to sort of join the company as in a fixed term contract, which I did. Then ended up with them in a structural change. I applied for a new role, and I've been lucky enough to be able to now lead the customer operations discipline for this company for their European section of the business, which covers 8 markets and looks at end-to-end customer operations and experience, not just at B2C but B2B. And so, it's a completely different business. So I think for me, future-wise, is to continue to build myself within this new role that I'm in, and build my team. I've got a new team, very, very sort of like diverse and cultural. For the first time ever, I don't have anyone based in the UK. So I've been learning some new things around that, and how to sort of manage a remote team, but also manage a culturally diverse team as well, which has been, something that I will continue to do. Because it's different. It is definitely different. And I've had to read some books on that. If anyone's interested, The Culture Map by Erin Myers is a really, really good book to help understand how you can support and lead when you are dealing with, cultural differences as well, which is great. It's really, really helped me. But as I progress, learn more about the company, look at how we can continue to transform, look at how we can continue to drive value for customers and get more loyalty and ensure that they want to come back and work with us. And then look, if there are opportunities and other opportunities come out outside of that with other businesses, who knows? What I class now as the world is my oyster. And I think that the grounding that I've had over the years within that sort of grassroots retail, working up from the shop floor and a till, has really helped me to be quite humble, but to understand where things happen and what's important, but not just for customers, but for colleagues as well, because, they are the backbone of any organization. And just continue to be the best version of myself, and make sure that as I continue in that career and wherever that takes me, that I also make sure that I still make time for me, make time for me and my husband and my family, because remembering that that's also where I get a lot of energy from as well. And then, keep evolving, keep learning, find new books, find new podcasts, find new things that you can sort of reflect on, that just give you those little things that you might not have known, that could change something really small, but have a really, really big difference as well. So yeah, continuing that evolvement as me as a person. At the age of 46, we say middle-aged, but we've got so much more life to come and life experiences, and it's about enhancing those to make them the best they can be.
So, Ian, if you could speak to yourself when you were a teenager, what would you say? And we're kind of using the Rod Stewart lyrics, I wish that I knew what I knew now when I was younger.
I would say, and be kinder to yourself, because you deserve it. Know that, stop putting the pressure on you and thinking that everybody else has these expectations of you, which is probably drawn and driven by your own insecurities. So be kinder to yourself. Know that you matter. Know that you add value, and know that you're important, and probably make time to allow people in on your journey a little bit earlier than what you did. Open and honest communication. You don't always have to put up a shield and a barrier, whatever life throws at you. And even those things have been thrown at me, and I've always faced it head on, but actually you don't always have to face it on your own. So they are the sort of things that I'd say, Rich, I would say to a younger version of me. But I would also point on that as well. I would never change what I've done, because I think it's made me the person I am today. So actually, I was never meant to be a solicitor. I was never meant to study law. I was meant to leave my A-levels halfway through. I'm a firm believer in fate, and everything happens for a reason. And even all of those challenges that probably weren't nice experiences, but helped to make me a stronger person and the better person that I hope that I am now and continue to be.
Well, thanks very much for your time today, Ian.
Well, you know what, T.A., let me just stop you there, because actually I know we're about to wrap up, but something that Ian said has actually given me a bit of inspiration, because you mentioned, Ian, about cooking and you enjoy cooking. Well, last week, TA challenged me. Well, I kind of stupidly put my foot in it when we were talking about recipes. And I asked TA to pick a recipe for me. So I've now got to cook him and Mrs. Shelano a chicken satay at some point. Have you got any tips for cooking that you can give me, Ian? Anything that's going to help me in this?
Can I just say, this is really embarrassing, Rich, considering that my husband's favourite dish from the Chinese is chicken satay, but I have never made it. So my only tip I can give anything with chicken is don't dry it out, mate. Keep it moist. If you can put it on a pressure cooker, if you've got a Ninja or an air fryer or anything like that, that is the key before you actually coat it. But don't dry it out too much. And make sure your sauce, I'm not great on this, but make sure the sauce is not too thin. Because sometimes some satay sauce can be really, really thin. But other than that, go for it. You might end up surprising yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Well, that makes me slightly more confident that now you're asking for advice on how to cook it, that we may actually get this meal at some point for season 2 of the podcast. But thanks very much. Thanks very much for your time today, Ian. It has been fascinating, and I'm sure it will be really interesting as well for listeners. Some great advice in there. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this today.
Yes, no problem at all. Thanks very much for asking.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here today, and we do appreciate you giving up your time. TA, we of course have one more episode left of season 1, and that is going to be the
10th and final episode of season 1, where we will wrap up the weight loss challenge of season 1. So to look forward to that next week. But with thanks to Ian and our other guests that have obviously massively supported some of the episodes for this season, really added huge value to the podcast. So thanks very much.
And we normally do the outro, but what we tend to do with our guest episodes is allow the guests to have the final say of the episode. So Ian, over to you.
My final thing would be, remember that you matter, find your superpower, and use it to make you and others happier. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian.
Two best mates, yeah, they're taking a stand. Rich and T.A, got your health in the hands. Weigh-ins, laps, and tales they tell. For beats and nights, the workouts, they're keeping it real. Oh, it's the middle-aged